how to run a successful business meeting. Like Professor Bernberg said, we've probably all been to meetings that are really unproductive. Probably a house meeting where a lot's been said but a little bit done. What we're going to do is we're going to show you the steps on how to run a successful and time-efficient business meeting. And now Ed's going to tell you what to do before a meeting starts.
All right, one of the keys to an effective meeting is to plan ahead. So first, make sure your meeting has a purpose. Make sure that you're not calling a meeting just to have a meeting, but that you are actually have a plan for what you're doing. As Jones says, make sure you can put your purpose on a matchbook. Make it concise, make it easily understandable. Also, make sure it's fun. And what we mean by this, not like a party, but where everyone knows the objectives and can get behind them and know what they need to do so that they can feel like they're really involved. Next, make sure you have the right people. Too many meetings are wasted because important decision makers, executives aren't there, so you can't really accomplish anything. So make sure you can know who's coming. Make sure also, as Jones says, you have a black book for your meetings. You know the agendas of the people who are going to be there. You know what it is that they're likely to bring up that's off topic, what their interests are, so you can direct the conversation. And make sure you also, as you're planning the people, you know who's going to be doing what. You don't want people to get to the meeting and be surprised that they have to speak about a topic, or assigning who, once you get there, who's going to take notes on the meeting. Also, make sure you have an agenda. Make sure the agenda sticks to your purpose. If your purpose is well set, but there's all kinds of items on your agenda that have nothing to do with your purpose, it's going to be a very disorganized meeting. Make sure you plan to stay on time. And what I mean by this is if you have an hour meeting, don't have 30 points on your agenda. You won't be able to get them all done. Make sure you have an idea of how long each point will take and you stick to it. Then, this is especially important if you're working as a team, make sure you circulate the agenda beforehand so that people know what they're going to be discussing so that they can plan, but also, especially in the team environment, so that they can make additions or suggestions about things to drop from the agenda. Also, make sure you try to diffuse problems ahead of time. If you know there's an issue in the office or in the company that's likely to come up but that's not on topic, make sure you go to the person likely to bring it up, explain to them that the issue will be addressed but not in this meeting. Finally, make sure you choose an appropriate setting. If you have a very formal meeting, you don't want a very informal meeting place. If you're going to discuss confidential information, you don't want an open meeting place. You want somewhere that's going to be quiet and secure. So make sure you choose an appropriate meeting place just to keep your meeting on focus. And now Alexander has a few points about what to do while you're actually at a meeting.
Right. Okay, guys, the first thing to do is to start on time. That sets the tone for the meeting. If you don't start on time, it shows that you don't believe, as the team leader, that the meeting's important. So start on time. And don't start recapping if someone comes in late. Obviously, if it's someone like a CEO or someone who's really important, yeah, probably take the time to recap. But in general, don't summarize again what you've already said. And then, when you walk into the meeting room, it's really important to choose a seat that's proper for each member. If you're just a team member or an observer, or someone who's going to take notes on the meeting, it's probably not proper to take a seat up front. Let the team leader take a seat up front. Now, when the meeting begins, the team leader needs to summarize past actions. And what I mean by that is he needs to talk with the team about what were the objectives and goals set at the previous meeting and see if they've covered them properly. When the discussion begins about the current topic, he needs to immediately define his agenda points. That'll set the tone for the meeting. And he needs to set goals, objectives, and what they wish to cover for this meeting. And then to guide the discussion, he needs to ask proper questions and specific questions, not broad questions like, what do you think about this point? If he has a question that he wants to address someone, he should address it in this way. When we were discussing the financials, you seemed a little concerned. Is there something you'd like to add? And that way you're kind of directing the discussion in the way that you want it to go and you're not going off topic. Also, it's really important to shut down unwanted disruptions. as politely as possible, but if there's something that's going to take you guys off topic, make sure that you direct the discussion and lead it back to where you want it to go. It's really important for the team leader to lead by example, and what I mean by that is like how he dresses is a really important thing. It shows that you really care about the meeting and you think it's important, so don't come dressed inappropriately. Hand position. When you're sitting down at a table, make sure that your hands aren't folded or like crossed, because that shows that you're kind of blocked off from everyone. Make sure that they're nicely placed on the table, open and rested. That shows that you're open and you're willing to listen to people's input and you want to take their advice. And then lastly, even if you're the team leader, you have to be attentive when other people are speaking. Because people have good points and they might want to bring them up, but if you're not listening and you don't seem to be attentive or taking notes, it could come off as you just have an agenda and you want to thrust it upon them and you don't want to hear their input. And now Ed's going to tell you guys what you should do after the meeting.
All right, there are really two important points to address after the meeting. First of all, make sure you send out a memo or an email just to confirm, not confirm, but just to recap what was decided in the meeting. That way everyone's on the same page, everyone has the same takeaway from the meeting. Also, if you had to shut down someone's discussion because it was off topic, but it really is an important point that needs to be addressed, make sure you go to that person and discuss that issue with him. This will prevent any sort of divisiveness in any upcoming meetings, and it'll also make the person feel more comfortable with the results of the meeting. This is also true if someone still seems concerned at the end of the meeting about some particular point that was discussed. As you can see from our presentation, a lot of the work that goes into leading a meeting comes beforehand. You need to start early, you need to plan ahead. Otherwise, what you're going to have is a lot of confusion, a lot of disorder, and not a lot accomplished at your meeting. So that's really the key thing here, is to make sure you plan ahead. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thanks, guys. Please do a few minutes for Q&A if you have questions for the presenters.
Yeah.
When I go to a meeting, if it's really boring or just dry, how do I make sure that I'm attentive?
Well, there's different ways. I like to take notes. When I get really bored, I find like one of the ways that I can stay focused is by taking notes. Now I understand that not everyone likes to do that. Another way to do it is to, I think the author of How to Wow, she says, like repeat verbatim what they're saying in your head, and because that way you can kind of try to make it more interesting to yourself if you're really internalizing the words that the leader's saying and you're really trying to go over it, it'll be a little more interesting, and it just takes so much more focus power, and that always takes more work, and that'll keep you attentive.
The last thing you want to do, though, is if you're given a handout, flip ahead. So like, this isn't interesting, let's see what's coming next. That just is kind of disrespectful, and also it means that if, say, the leader calls on you and says, what do you think about this point we just discussed? What are your concerns? You won't have any idea what's going on. So make sure you stay with the current point of the meeting. Yes.
Your presentation addressed a lot of points that were great for someone who is that team leader planning the meeting. Do you have any suggestions on being the person who's maybe attending really dysfunctional meetings, how to perhaps suggest to someone else that their meetings aren't always on track?
You're saying if you're an observer and you kind of
if you're just an
notice that
attendee of the meetings and you kind of notice these bad habits.
Well, I think there's a time and place for that. Obviously, probably not during the meeting to speak out, because perhaps like a lot of times the team leader does go off topic, but maybe a lot of the times he has good points and you're going to disrupt him in the middle of the meeting. Probably not the best idea. Like Ed said, the leader is going to address concerns after the meeting, but also that's time for the observers or the allies, the people taking notes, that they can come and address their concerns too. So yeah, that would be the best time, probably after a meeting.
One suggestion I would make is just so that the leader is not caught off guard, talk to him pretty shortly after the meeting and before he schedules the next one. Because if he schedules the next one and then you go to him, it kind of looks like you're attacking. It might look like you're attacking him. Like, this last meeting was awful. When we're going to this next meeting, be better. So make sure it's in that in-between period.
So two things I want to add on to this. One is I just want you to notice something about Q&A when you have more than one person answering Q&A. These guys have done a nice job of not interrupting one another. That's important not to do. The other thing you can do when you have a situation where Alex gives an answer and then Ed wants to build on it, it's good to do something like, just to build on what Alex is saying, or, I think Alex makes a great point, let me just add one other thing to it. So you want to affirm what somebody in your group has just said. You don't want to look like you're vying for airtime. So you guys did a nice job of that, but it reminded me of that as you're answering the questions. Affirm what your other partner is saying, and then build on it. For Chad's point, I want to ask Chad, I'm going to turn the question back on Chad and ask you. You've been going to dysfunctional meetings for a month now, let's say. What would you do to try to address that situation?
I think that obviously you need to go to the person who has the authority to change that, but I guess what I was wondering was the best way to do that. I mean, I think probably face-to-face is the best way to do it, and then I think the best way is to maybe go with constructive suggestions to change it, maybe have alternatives to what they're currently doing to suggest.
Okay.
I guess if I were the one who someone was coming to, be more receptive if they had, alternative suggestions that maybe would improve the problems they saw.
Okay, Liz, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd love to add on to that. I one time was struggling with someone who was running a team meeting, and I probably addressed it initially wrong in saying these meetings don't go well, blah, blah, because then it just sounded like I was attacking that person. But then I started learning that if I approached them saying, you know what, it really helps me to prepare and have my thoughts in order if I have an agenda. That will really help me be confident in your team leading skills. So if you could just prepare for me, I know it's a little extra work. If you want, I can type it up for you if you want. Or how can I contribute, but an agenda will help me. And I put it kind of on me that this helps me do a better job.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent observation. I think if you want to see a change in the meeting, the last thing you want to do is pitch it in a way that makes the meeting organizer feel like they've failed in something. So it's great to say what helps me is an agenda. Would you mind if I put something together like that? I'd be happy to type it up and distribute it. Or you could say, what really helps me is a follow-up after the meeting with what we talked about and action items. Would you like it if I help to coordinate that? That's a softer way of getting to something that's going to make the meeting more productive. Yeah, so good points. Okay, sorry, any other questions for Alex and Ed on meetings? I think there's some great content here, and I would just underscore the point about to make a meeting productive, it's really about what you do beforehand, what you do away from the table that can make a meeting productive. So some great points here. If you were focused more on sort of observations for feedback purposes, please know that I always post these slide decks. So you can go out to the portal and look back through the slide deck and try just to understand the content of the presentation. Kaz, you had a point or a question?
Yeah, I have a question. In meetings, like for example, us going out, eventually we're going to be these new people in these companies, and say we're asked to come to a meeting, and we're kind of the newbies there. Is there ever a time when it's not our place to disagree? Or if we do, say somebody is presenting or there's a discussion taking place and we're new and we aren't necessarily established there, is it okay for us to disagree in the meeting? And if so, maybe any advice on how to go about that?
This is not really something that came up, but I would think one thing you want to be clear on is the point that's under discussion really a point that can be objected to? If you don't know, if it might just be an information point that's not really open to debate, I would just not bring it up. But if you think it is something open for discussion, I would definitely bring up your point as I feel concerned about, rather than I don't agree with. That way it feels more like you're trying to address some kind of your own, kind of like when you're discussing a meeting with a team leader. That way it feels like it's put on you, not on them, to fix the problem, if there is one.
All right, guys, that's our last question, so let's give a round of applause again.